record and live on Facebook. It'll take a minute, and you see the live symbol on there. Nice. So you should see a live symbol. So yeah. Hey everybody, Leticia here, coming to you today for another edition of my weekly Money Matters webinar series. And today's topic, as announced a bit earlier today, is up-level your lifestyle with commercial real estate investing. And I have the pleasure of having as my guest today, Mr. Matthew Frederick. Matthew is a very experienced real estate investor. He has a 30-year career of investing in both residential and commercial real estate. And I'm going to pass it to you shortly, Matthew. But the reason I figured this is a good topic to discuss is, first of all, many people are looking for additional ways to make money these days and basically up-level their lifestyle. And even though we've had other real estate investing meetings, webinars so far, most of them have focused on what we call residential real estate investing. So the world of commercial real estate is still a big unknown to people. And so I'd like to break the ice and we'll have a talk about, you know, what is commercial real estate, how it differs from residential real estate investing, and why you may want to consider it. Okay, so without further ado, welcome Matthew to our webinar today.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Thanks for agreeing to be my guest. And so Matthew, why don't you, perhaps we should start by telling people a little bit about your background, you know, how you got started with real estate investing in the first place, and perhaps how you then pivoted towards commercial real estate and why. I guess that's most important.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. So I bought my first house about 19 years old, but I was not an investor. So as an immigrant to Canada, I came when I was 7 years old. I always wanted to own something. So from the time I was 16 to 19, I had a business, saved up, and I had my parents co-sign my first property for me. But I was not an investor, it was just to have a home. And then my brother, a few years later, when I was a teacher, he came to me and said, you know what, Matthew, let's invest in real estate. And I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm a teacher. He says, well, I'm a cop, I have a gun, I'm your older brother, and you better do it. And I thought, okay, you know what? Why not do it? So my brother pulled me into it because he's more of a visionary. I'm more of a systems guy. So I put together the systems, but he's more of a visionary on where to go. So he sort of pulled me into investing. And I started, like everybody else, with 1 or 2 or 3 homes, like investment properties, in-law scenarios, two family income. By the time I had 3 properties, I hit the wall. I couldn't afford any more. I maxed out with my job. And I was supposed to be making money. I mean, I had 3 houses, like I'm supposed to be rich, but I wasn't. And I found that I was spending a lot of my daytime money from my daytime job to compensate for the shortfalls, even though I had positive cash flow. In some months, something would happen that would cause me to have to fork some money out. And I thought, you know what, I want to go from the buy and the hold and the rent to probably buy, fix, and sell so I can generate some income. So I brought some investors in to give me the money in order to buy 1 or 2 or 3 other houses, to which I started doing the buy, fix, and sells, generated some money. And at some point, I thought to myself, man, I'm working so hard. I have like 16 or 17 properties. And again, I should be wealthy. But it's almost like having 16 kids. and it just keeps you busy. And I thought, why am I going all the way around the city from place to place to place to deal with 16 roofs and 16 different locations where I had to manage each one because it was a house? I thought, why don't I jump into commercial where I can get about 10 units in one spot
Right.
and then pay a manager to actually manage the property for me. And these were built stronger. I mean, a commercial property is it's purpose built. It's like a Jeep designed for off-road. Whereas a house, even if you turn it into a two-family home, it's almost like a Honda Civic, which is a great car, but not really an off-roader. And once I got into the commercial, and again, I brought investors together because by that time I had some experience to bring the money to the table to help me actually buy. And that's how I got into commercial. So I started with residential, and after a while, I was just too tired, just getting too tired.
Got it.
And I jumped into the commercial world.
So thanks for sharing that, Matthew. So I think one of the logical questions is, obviously most people who start real estate investing start on the residential side of things. And I think the reason is it's just an easy transition. All of us have lived in a house or owned a house, and it's something that's easy for people to understand. And it seems more accessible in terms of the costs also, because I think there's a certain intimidation factor that comes with commercial real estate. You're thinking, oh my God, that property is $2 million. How can I can't afford that. That's like the first thing that probably, and also I think people are also potentially intimidated by the management or what's involved. So with that said, would you perhaps recommend that some people, rather than starting with residential, they could actually, if they're interested in real estate investing in general, do you see some people literally starting with commercial and just skipping, your long and painful road that you went through, managing 17 properties, 17 different roofs? Do you think it's feasible for people to start, directly into commercial? And yeah.
Okay, so I'll answer that in three parts. Now, starting with residential was good because at least I learned a lot about managing people. See, people think real estate is about the property. It's mostly about managing the people who are fixing your property, who are renting from you, the partners you bring to the table. So a lot of it is communication and dealing with people. So I learned a lot of that. And also I learned to have a bit of a thicker skin. When you renovate a property and you see somebody damaging it as a tenant, I mean, you take it personal in the beginning, right? You take it really personal. So I had to get past that. So for some people, starting off with residential is okay. But I always believe that even if you're doing residential, right now you should be doing probably 20% commercial, which means you should be learning commercial while you're doing residential. Because what I discovered is I learned residential, I became good at it. And then when I got to commercial, all of a sudden it was so much harder that looking back at the residential, it became so much easier. So you should always spend about 20% of your time at the next level anyway, trying to get into that level. And what it does, the extra 20% helps you get through the 80% even faster. Because once I became a developer, I started building 4-story buildings, 50-unit, 4-story condo buildings. All of a sudden, commercial investing became very, very easy. So it's almost like I'm in grade 10. I go to university to play basketball for 3 months. I'm terrible. But when I come back to grade 10, I'm amazing because I had to bring my game up so much.
Okay.
So number one, some people need to start in residential. Number two, some people should be doing a bit of commercial, learning it while they're doing residential. Number three, some people, if you have the experience and the knowledge and you get a great mentor, someone who's been there before, you can jump the entire process of going through residential and going right to multifamily buildings, 6 units plus, or even strip plazas. So I know it's a long answer, but all three of those would be valuable to understand.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matthew. So since we're on the topic of commercial real estate, maybe we could take a few minutes to explain to people, what is considered commercial real estate, because we understand residential to be where people live, but then we have something called multi-unit residential, which is considered by lenders to be commercial real estate, right? So
right.
I know do you have a few slides where you can kind of show what's considered commercial property? Because there are different types of commercial properties, right?
I do. Are you?
Yeah, I'm going to make you host so you could share your screen with us. And thanks everyone for watching. If you have any questions on today's topic, please put them in the comments section below. And Matthew will answer them towards the end, okay? Thank you.
Is my screen?
You're not sharing as of yet.
Okay.
You have the ability to share. Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm there.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay, so commercial, you have multifamily. Generally, it's from 6 units above, and multifamily is considered apartments. So it's in the Landlord-Tenant Act in most places, and it's for someone to stay, live. It's not really a place to conduct business. Now, some banks would look at a 6-unit as residential. So in Canada, the Royal Bank would look at 6-unit as residential. Other banks would look at 6-unit as commercial. And again, multifamily is good. The upsides are in up and down markets, people need a place to live. The downside, it's very labor intensive, and you should have a property manager to take care of it because you have lots of people. You have fridges and stoves. You have dogs and cats. You have great kids. You have families who get together, and sometimes they spat a bit. But it's a great investment on top of it all. The next one, I would say it's called a Strip Plaza. And this is more really retail commercial. And when I buy something like this, all I have to do is to provide an empty space, and the business will go in and they'll put all the money in to fix it up. That's called leasehold improvements. And then I can charge them rent, and I can charge them what's called taxes, maintenance, and insurance. So if I have any expenses, and if it goes up, I can pass it on to them. It's not really in the landlord board, so therefore I can increase the rents based on my leases, and if they don't pay, I can lock the door in 15 days. By the way, these pictures are just general pictures off the internet. These are not buildings that I own. The next one will be an office building. Now, office is different than retail. Office is more for services, although sometimes you do see retail at the bottom of an office. Now, I've owned office buildings, and I've had a problem that I could never keep them full. But when they are full, it almost seems as though when one person has moved in and it's full, a business is closing and they're moving out. But when it's full, it operates nicely. And again, I don't have to worry about fridges and stoves and pets. And I love pets, but obviously it's not a scenario we have to worry about when it comes to office. The next is warehousing. I find warehousing very difficult personally because you're managing a massive floor space. And a company may have some overage and they want to rent that floor space for their extra stock. And it's always shifting. So I would say there's multifamily, there's office, there's Strip Plaza, and there's warehousing. And people always ask me, is it very expensive to get into commercial? I think overall, residential could be more expensive, and I'll just explain to you quickly why. If I were to get a duplex, let's just keep it a simple price. Let's just say $400,000. Now I know you won't find one for $400,000 in Toronto, and maybe not even in Hamilton anymore. The average property in Hamilton, Ontario is $600,000. And it just jumped to 700. Now, I think it was 600,000 last January, and this January, it's 780 for just an average house. But either way, let's say we got a house for 400,000, and let's pretend that it's a duplex and the cash flow is 500. Now, people get into real estate in order to, let's say, affect their lives in a meaningful way. And a meaningful way could mean $6,000 a month. And if I'm making $6,000 a month as a cash flow, that would mean I need to have 12 houses. So 500 times 12, that's a lot of houses. See, that's a lot of roofs. That's a lot of locations and situations to deal with. And it could cost me $4.8 million because 400,000 times 12 is 4.8 over time. Now, a commercial space, Strip Plaza, could be for 2 million. But because it's retail and I pass the cost on, I can generate a lot more cash flow from a retail store. So at $2 million, if I'm generating $3,000, I need 2 of those to get 6,000. So in the end, overall, sure, a house is less expensive, 400,000. A building is more expensive, 2 million. But overall, you'd need $4.8 million to get to the mountaintop. In this case, you would need about 4 million, 2 houses, 2 buildings, as opposed to 12, managed stronger, and there are benefits to it also. So again, it all depends on where a person is, because someone can say to me right now, but I don't have too money. Well, that's where you have to grab someone to help you to understand how to talk to people who have money and how to bring them in as the partner. And you're going to parlay the knowledge that you've gained because you have the time and knowledge perhaps, and they may have the money, but maybe not the time.
Right. Are we going to talk a little bit about the difference between residential and commercial financing? Because that's also a very attractive point of difference, right? Because I don't know if you have a slide on that or if you could just chat about it. Yeah.
I do. So when it actually comes to financing, the good news with residential is you can do 80% financing. You can go to the bank, you get 20%, fantastic. You can even go through for your own personal property in Canada, you can go through CMHC or in the US PMI. But when it comes to investing, you're probably going to have to pay about 15% down anyway for investment property. When it comes to commercial, it's different. It's not 20% down. It's actually 35% down. So it's a lot more. So if I had a building that's $1 million, and let's say there was debt and equity in that building, this is the person selling it, I'd have to find 35% to put down on most commercial buildings. Now, I did mention that actually I shouldn't mention the name of the bank, but I will say there's a bank that sometimes treats you royally. Well, that bank, ultimately, they do look at a sixplex as a residential, so you can get 80% financed. But everything else is going to be 35% down. I've seen 30% down. And you're coming out with a large chunk of change. So a lot of people, when they buy the properties, they try to get something called a vendor take-back mortgage.
Yes.
It's almost like when I'm buying a property, the seller gives me like an IOU, where I can owe them some money over time. And it might look this way. So I put down $200,000, which I'm putting down 20%. I may ask them to hold the mortgage in second position, an IOU for 20%, and I may go for the bank to get 60%. Now, very few frontline banks like VTBs. In fact, the Scotiabank has done a VTB in the past that I'm aware of because I've done business with them. But I haven't found any other frontline banks who really accept them. So therefore, you may consider credit unions, trust companies, and other private sources. Sometimes what the bank will do is they'll say, okay, I'll subtract away the VTB from the portion that I'm giving. But again, it all depends on your situation, depends on the bank, depends on a scenario. So I never want to give a definite.
What do you mean sorry, Matthew, what do you mean they'll subtract the VTB? What do you mean they'll subtract it?
Okay, so in the past, I've gone to a bank and I said, okay, I'm getting 65% from you. Mm-hmm. The owner is going to give me a mortgage of 15%. Mm-hmm. So they said to me, here's what we're going to do. Just for you, special. We're going to take the 65% we owe you, that we're going to give you, we're going to subtract away 15% from it and give you the lower amount.
Oh, geez. So that's not very helpful, right? Yeah, so I have heard that, as you said, like the A lenders are not fans of having a second position mortgage after them. I don't understand why. It doesn't really affect them in any way, but they're, we all know the A lenders are the most strict. They're strict on the residential side of financing, and they're also strict when it comes to commercial. So you have other options in the marketplace, and it's a good idea to deal with a commercial mortgage broker. So you want to deal with a commercial mortgage broker when it comes to commercial financing.
That's the important part, because if your commercial mortgage broker even spent 15 years working with a bank, there might be a special relationship there and understanding that makes the impossible sometimes possible. So therefore, it all depends on relationship. It depends on the structure. I get where the banks are coming from. They don't want you to put nothing in and they hold the entire bag. They want you to have a vested interest. So I get that. But at the same time, it would be easier if I was able to get, again, the 60 or 65 and plus on top, get the VTB. And I have gotten that from a major bank. Now, notice how I went 2020. When this is taught, a lot of people say, put 5% down and get 15% from the vendor, from the seller, and then get the rest from the bank. I find it's much easier to sell it this way. I'm putting in 20%. Can you hold 20%? I'm only asking to do what I've done, and then get the rest from the bank. The other process is where I've financed most of my deals is getting a joint venture partner, someone who was in a better position financially than me, or had income that they were not using, and they provided the down payment and the mortgage at the regular 35% down and 65% financing. But they were too busy in life to actually work the property, and they didn't have the knowledge. So I took on that role for the next 5 years as the partner, and we split things 50-50. And a lot of people say, well, why would somebody put all the money in and actually only take half the profit? It's kind of weird concept.
Yeah.
Well, today, all these years later, because I'm not in the position I was as a beginner, my time is valuable. I would rather have somebody who is younger. I'm 56 as of last week, so someone who's younger has more time. Thank you. Has more time to actually go and buy that building, and you know what? Take care of it. You work hard like a dog for the next 5 years. You raise my child. You raise my building for me. And I'll tell you what, I'll give you half of everything because I don't have the time or the patience anymore to deal with as much as I used to deal with. So it all depends on where you are in life. And we've seen 50-50s. There's been 7 billion of them in the last 30 years. It's called pregnancy. You see that? One person, 3 minutes. That's the down payment. That's the mortgage. 3 minutes. The other person, 9 months. So when I'm carrying somebody's property for 9 months, I'm the one taking the phone call. Ultimately, I think they get away pretty easy. See how that works?
That is a really funny comparison, Matthew.
It's true. I always feel as though I'm the
I
pregnant.
sort of get it. In other words, the money partner is the one that provides the down payment, and then there's going to be an active partner that then manages the property, in this case, in the way you structure your deals over a 5-year period, and then with the option to renew if I'm guessing, right? If they're not willing to take on active management duties or perhaps hire management. I mean, even you as an investor, you probably have your chosen property management firms that you work with, but you're the one in charge of pretty much anything that happens with the building. And in this case, it's a totally passive investment for the investor, correct?
Exactly. And I had to bring the years of experience to find it, to analyze it, to negotiate it, to structure it, to make sure the repairs are not the wrong repairs, make sure the situation is good. And then even the property manager does not have a vested interest. I only make money when there is cash flow. I only make money when it goes up in value. So now for the next 5 years, I'm the one who is making sure that building is actually growing. And at the end of 5 years, they can refinance, pay me out, and I leave. Or if it's an assumable mortgage, we can refinance, pay them out, I assume the mortgage, or we can sell the property, both go our own ways, or we can go 5 more years. So that's generally what happens with a relationship.
Got it. So you know what? You talked a little bit about financing commercial properties. So the interesting thing with financing commercial is that sellers, knowing that you have a higher down payment requirement, to the extent that they have equity in the building, they're often willing to advance this private mortgage called a vendor take-back mortgage. When it comes to commercial properties, they tend to be a lot more likely to do that, at least some amount of a private mortgage from the seller. Whereas with residential properties, that's almost never the case unless you're buying in a really depressed market in Timbuktu, I don't know, somewhere, in places where properties don't sell very easily. Not as likely to find anywhere, in the GTA, for example, or close to the GTA.
Right. And the ones who do give their VTB, you have to keep in mind they have a purpose too. They want to get the building sold, and they may not be sold without that. But secondly, buildings jump up in value tremendously over time. So they may have bought it for $500,000. They're selling it for $2.5 million. There's $2 million worth of equity. And if they take that money upon closing, they have to pay tax as capital gains in Ontario on $2 million. So if they allow you to hold on to a portion for the next 5 years, then they can receive their interest over 5 years. And perhaps in 5 years, they may be retired in a lower tax bracket. and then they receive the capital gain when they're in a lower tax bracket because you can carry it for 5 years. I don't want to get too complex, but there's some tax benefits
There
for
are
them to do that as well.
absolutely, absolutely. So they can actually spread out their tax burden. But that's my understanding. They can spread it out over 5 years as opposed to taking the hit at the time of the sale, the entire
Correct.
hit at the time of the sale. So in from that perspective, a larger VTB may be in their best interest, but then you have to find the bank lender or the credit union that's willing to work with that, to go in first position when there is a larger VTB, for example.
And we even had some sellers be the only mortgage. They are the main VTB.
I
And the
know
reason why,
that's a good
sometimes,
situation.
sometimes the reason why is because if they had all the money, a vice might take away that money. People who win $1 million, they're poor again a year later. And if you don't know how to manage that money, you might drink it, you might smoke it, you might gamble it, you might do crazy things with it.
Family
And at the
members.
same time, give it to family members who expect it. So sometimes I've done deals where the owner decided, oh, I'll leave my money in as a mortgage, so I have an excuse not to use it or shell it all out, and I can receive an annuity, almost a payment coming in for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and it's really an advantageous strategy, for retirees, people who are they're seeking steady income, but they don't want to deal with the property management headaches anymore. So you're essentially replacing whatever cash flow they were getting from the property. You're now replacing it with a monthly mortgage payment that you make to them. In case people don't know what this concept is about, but that's essentially what happens. They're still getting the same or sometimes even better depending on the sale price, cash flow as before, but now without the management headaches, you have now taken that over from them. Matthew, maybe, we spoke a little bit about, I really liked your slide that talks about how, if your goal is to have an additional monthly cash flow of, let's say, $3,000 a month, it would take a while to accomplish that, investing in residential real estate if you're just relying on the cash flow. On the other hand, with commercial, you could have one or two deals and all of a sudden you've really up-leveled your lifestyle. Let's talk a little bit about what's involved in acquiring a commercial property in case people are interested. I would say most people in my audience probably have had an opportunity to buy at least one property, their principal residence, so they know what's involved with that process. Is it a little more complex when it comes to commercial properties?
Well, physically, it is more complex, that there could be a lot that can go wrong with a larger property. And when something goes wrong, it costs a lot of money. So if you don't inspect it correctly, you can hire an inspector to inspect the house. And if the inspector misses a problem with the roof, it's going to cost you $5,000, $6,000. But if they miss a problem with a roof of a building, it could be $150,000. The furnace system could be $40,000. So not only will I get an inspector to come in, once it's inspected, I make sure I bring a professional who is in a specific field. So I might bring in a roofer who's looking for a problem with the roof because they want a job, and they can actually find problems for me that the inspector may not find. I might bring an electrician to look at a few units, a plumber to look at a few units, a furnace HVAC person to look at the furnace, and a foundation person. And they will usually catch whatever the major problems are. And then I could reduce the price because of it, or I can walk away from it. So if you understand how it's analyzed correctly, then you avoid problems. So it becomes easier. Now, when it comes to conditions, you have conditions in an offer asking for many, many things. And the things I ask for are things to protect me. So I may ask for all the bills. I may ask for a copy of all the leases. So with commercial deals, you get a lot more information so that you can investigate a lot harder and deeper. So you would know ahead of time, probably 90% of anything that can go wrong, you can get it ahead of time if you do it the right way. Now, there's a wrong way to do it. Some people just say, if there's a deal, put an offer and I want it. Perhaps they can afford to make a mistake, but not everybody who's a beginner can afford to make a mistake. If you have a large portfolio and if you buy a building and you pay the wrong price for it, it doesn't matter, well, you can do that. But a beginner cannot do that. So you have to have the right paperwork, the right conditions, You have to have the right understanding of the building itself. And you have to be able to find the building. Here's the key thing, off market, before it even goes for sale.
Yeah.
And that's where a good coach or mentor can come in, because only the type that will go out with you in a sense and walk through the process with you. Because to do well in commercial real estate, you have to get deals from people who have not even thought of selling. And you have to have a conversation and start the process. So therefore,
Yeah.
competition is not going to be your issue.
Right.
And you have time to do things you need to do, like get your financing.
Right. I don't know if we need to still share the screen, Matthew. You can lower it if you want. Maybe you can bring up more slides later.
Okay.
But yeah, I was gonna say, I know in recent years there was an increasing number of investors that were getting into specifically the multi-unit residential space. So any multi-unit properties that were, and by the way, by multi-unit again, we mean usually 5 units plus.
Right.
You know, as Matthew mentioned, there is a lender that will finance, you know, 6, and I think I heard even up to 8 units as a residential property,
Right.
as a residential deal. But most lenders, if you're going into 5 units plus, they consider that commercial financing. And so yeah, you're absolutely right, Matthew. I remember seeing listings for multi-unit properties, and they were, you know, getting multiple offers. They were, and even the asking price, once the seller decides to list it on the MLS or a listing service like that, I remember the asking prices were literally not realistic. And if you looked at the numbers, the deal didn't make sense. Because maybe there's something else we should talk about in terms of how commercial property is valued as opposed to residential. And do you want to talk a little bit about that? I know.
Actually, I can. It's hard to teach on the screen,
Okay.
but I will say this to you. Obviously, a building has revenue coming in, has expense going out, and there's a number called the net operating income. That's the difference. Okay, so for instance, I might have something I could use at the bottom of this screen. So I'm going to use this right here. Okay, so let's say a building someone's asking me for $1 million. Like, they're selling the building for $1 million. How do I know if I should pay $1 million or not?
Right.
An area has something called the cap rate. I don't have the time to get into that right now, but let's just pretend an area of the city has a cap rate that's 7%. Now I have to buy this building, hopefully, at 7% or higher. Kind of hard to do these days, but let's just, for teaching purposes, say that I'm trying to buy a 7% cap building at a 7% cap area. And that simply means if I were to take 60,000 right now and divide it into 1 million. So if I divide, hang on a second. If I divide 60,000, the net operating income, into 1 million, I'm going to get 6%. Okay, so 6%.
That's lower than your desired 7%.
So 60,000, which is the revenue and the expense, divided by 1 million, I get 6%. Well, 6% is lower than 7%, so 1 million is too expensive. But if I go 60,000 divided by 850, I'll get 7%. So therefore, I know that technically 60 divided by 850 is 7%, and the area of that the building's in is 7% also. The building's cap rate is 7. 60 divided by 850 is 7%. So the building's cap rate, the area cap rate, if it matches, that's one way to understand, am I even close? Number two would be to look at comparables. Other buildings in the area, what did they sell for? Because the appraiser will take this cap rate, this 850, and compare it to the buildings in the area. And the buildings in the area might be 950. And if it's 950, they'll find a mid ground. So to answer your question, how do you evaluate a building? You look at the area's cap rate, 7%. You look at the building that you're buying at the price you're buying it at, what's its cap rate? You look at the comparables in the area and see the mid ground. Then you look at the building itself to see what's been done to it to entice a higher expense or a higher cost, and what's going on in the area. Is it LRT coming in? Is it a trendy area? Is something great in the area? And at the same time, the fact that the building was not for sale and you knocked on their door, you got to put a little bit of extra in there. So cap rate,
Sure.
matching, comparable, what's going on with the building, what the improvements are, the condition of the building itself, the tenants, also what's in the area, and I knocked on their door, so I got to pay a little bit extra for that. I know it's probably better taught if I had a blackboard, but hopefully that makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas when it comes to residential properties, they're strictly evaluated on what we call market comparables.
That's right.
So, my understanding also with commercial, you got to look at that income that comes in, the value of the building, the way lenders look at it is a function of the income that comes in. In other words, the revenue that they really look at the property as a business. They don't, the way lenders look at it. Now, in terms of what you decide to pay, that's your business, but then keep in mind, the lenders are often more conservative in terms of how much they're willing to lend, how they value the property. So it's, from my understanding, it's never a good idea to overpay for a property, or oftentimes what I saw happens, Matthew, is potential sellers will list, oh yeah, the income, the potential income for this unit is $1,600 per unit. Meanwhile, they have it rented at like $850. So one thing that I learned is like, you don't want to be buying the property based on potential rents, because you don't know how long it's going to take for you to cycle out those tenants in order to actually, yeah. So it's never.
That is actually the problem, because even though I should be buying this 7% in a 7% area, 7% building in a 7% area, the seller is going to want something at 6%, even though it can't be mathematically justified. The fact is, so many people want to buy a building, now it becomes a bit ridiculous. But here's my job. My job is to take this building that I bought for $850, and if I can increase the revenue and reduce the expense, I can change that NOI. It started with $60K. How do I increase the revenue? Many ways. I can increase the rent when somebody moves out. I can obviously put a sign on the building, rent the sign. I can put lockers, storage, a vending machine,
Parking.
There's lots of little ways to increase the rent. And how do I bring down the expense? I can just make everything efficient, right? But if I can take the same NOI from 60,000 up to 80K, so I'm making more money now because I've increased the revenue, reduced the expense, then if I were to take 80K and divide it by 7%, so 80K divided by 7%, the area's cap rate, my new value is now 1.143 million. So if I do this in 1 year, increase the revenue, reduce the expense, I just took the value from 850 up close to $300,000 in 1 year. Yeah. And then if I were to sell it, and it's a very efficient building, I can justify selling it at 6%, even though the area isn't 7%. I can even justify selling it at 5% now, because people sell below anyway, just for the heck of it. Yeah. But if I were to sell it at 6%, what can I sell it for? Well, 6 into 80,000 is 1.33 million. So I can buy it at 850, increase the revenue, reduce the expense to get the NOI from 60 up to 80. 80,000 is the NOI divided by the 7%, which gives me the value of the building, 1.143 million. I took it up 300,000. And then if I can sell it at 6%, even if I kept this the same, 80 by 6%, I can justify selling it for one. That's a $500,000 increase over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Again, it's just classroom here, but this is the concept of what you do when you buy commercial real estate.
Yeah.
You want to increase the revenue, reduce the expense, get the NOI to go up, and therefore justify selling it or refinancing it against a lower cap rate.
Got it. Do you want to, I know we've used the term NOI. I think you have a slide that defines what it is, in case people don't know. So it stands for net operating income. But yes. What are we really talking about? It's the gross rents that come in. What do we deduct to get the net operating income?
So basically, you have your gross rents coming in. Mm-hmm. You subtract away every expense except for the mortgage. The mortgage is not included.
Okay.
You know, so your heat, your power, heat, hydro, water, sewer, your property taxes, your maintenance, your management, your insurance, your snow, lawn, security, anything management, anything that is an expense, you subtract away from the revenue coming in. and that gives you your NOI, your net operating income.
Got
And then
it.
from that, you subtract away your mortgage to get your cash flow.
Got it. Makes sense. Thanks for explaining that for people who are not familiar. And even I have heard the buzzword and I forget, but I got it. Thank you. So yeah, this could literally be life-changing money. And this is a big upside of commercial properties. You're not going to see this kind of an increase in the price of a residential property. I mean, the way you generate an increase, you could force appreciation into a residential property by performing renovations. We've also been very fortunate in recent years, anywhere in Southern Ontario, property prices, the market has just gone up and up because of immigration, because of laborers and other market forces. But ultimately, those things are not really within our control. So one of the reasons I like commercial as an asset, commercial real estate, is that I feel like you as an investor have more control, because you can make the business, the building more efficient. If there's an old boiler, you could choose to replace that. There are things you can do to make the building more efficient. You have control, at the very least, even if you're in a rent control environment like Ontario, you have every right to increase the rents annually. Now, actually, that brings me, Matthew, I was going to ask you, because I think there's been a moratorium on rent increases. Is that still happening in Ontario?
I believe so.
In light of COVID, right?
Yes, yes.
That's
Well,
a little unfortunate.
COVID has changed a lot of things for the retail aspect of real estate. Obviously, the multifamily, there are restrictions right now. There is moratoriums. That's all there. But before, what I used to plan for was something called an RIP system, an RI system. If I'm going to buy a strip plaza and I had retail, which is great, those stores in there, I would migrate them or change them out over time to be recession-proof businesses that can last in a recession, and also internet-proof, a business that if I want to get my hair cut, I can't just take my hair and send it to India, get it cut, and then bring it back. So things you have to do on deck, right?
Right.
And like a variety store, a hairdresser, a females-only gym, pizza shop, and that was more recession internet-proof. Now with pandemic, now I have to have this RIP system. Some of the things that worked that worked in recession and internet, like beauty, hair cutting, massage, or anything like that, has been closed down.
Yeah.
So now when I buy property in the future, I have to look at the recession-proof, internet-proof, and pandemic-proof. So what are essential services? And I have to make sure you have that as a retail component in your stores now. It seems like every 3 years, something interesting is happening health-wise. So it's going to continue, right?
Yeah. So I mean, that's a logical question, Matthew. I mean, obviously the retail space has been affected. Obviously, lots of businesses have been forced to shut their doors. And I know the government is offering certain rental subsidies, but sometimes they're just not enough, So as a result, businesses, because I think they were only subsidizing either up to 75 or 90% at the most of the rent. So and the landlord had to apply. It was not the fastest or smoothest process, from what I understand, for the small businesses that were affected. So, do you see, because you're on the front lines, like you're always looking at commercial real estate. Do you really see like an uptick in vacancies, for example, in the markets where you operate?
I do. So a few things have happened. A lot of people are probably going to work at home in a hybrid scenario. So where they were at work for 5 days a week, it could become 3 days at home, 2 days at work, or 3 days at work, 2 days home. Therefore, if you're downtown Toronto and you're a very big company and you're renting 10,000 square feet, they may cut back to 6,000 square feet and then have 2,000 square feet at a satellite city, maybe Vaughan, or another satellite city, maybe Mississauga, for people who are working closer to home. People say to me, well, will people ever leave downtown Toronto? Great talent is what a company needs, because great talent, almost like a great basketball player, brings leadership to the company, brings more sales, increases the standard, and again, is more of a teacher. But to draw in talent, you have to have culture. If a company has culture, it can draw talent. But to draw
Right.
talent, you have culture. To have culture, you have to have an environment, because the environment must be that fosters the culture. An environment is still attached to real estate. So it's hard to bring the best people in to a company that's only got only this big. So yes, there will always be a requirement for a large space downtown, but at the same time, maybe not as much space. So therefore, there will be satellite offices. And before COVID, when I try to rent from large companies, like rent office space, they had an attitude with, you know what, here's the rent. You're lucky if you get it. Today now, what they have to do is give us perks. They have to treat us a whole hell of a lot nicer than they were before. And obviously, I'm a landlord, so I have to treat people, not that I was not treating them nice. I mean, I'm a sweet guy, but now I have to treat them nicer because they have options. They can go elsewhere.
Right.
So now, as a landlord for office space, I have to provide more perks, things that will benefit them, not just how it used to be. You're lucky to get a space because there's no space available. So
Right.
that's changed as well. And
So,
and will people go back to the office? Sure, because if you want a promotion, sometimes you have to talk at the water cooler to get that promotion. It's kind of hard to sit on the screen with 30 people and stand out. So after a couple of years, if you're not getting a promotion, you might opt to go back to the office a bit more often. So I think it'll always be there, but I do think hybrid is here to stay. And so
got it.
therefore office space will then switch to massive spots to smaller but portions elsewhere.
Got it. So that's your take on office space. But what are you foreseeing regarding all this the vacant retail space
Okay,
that
so,
is
so
a
all these
result of
big box
this?
stores, yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a problem now.
Mhm.
Self-storage has taken off like crazy. So now some of these big box stores can store a portion of their inventory in a climate-controlled 3-story self-storage building because it is climate controlled. So
Mhm.
instead of needing so much box space, like 3,000 square feet, they can now get away with 1,000 square feet. You see, what COVID did, what people don't really realize, COVID took 2027 and brought it to today. Ultimately, the internet was killing retail space anyway.
Mm.
But where we technically would be in 2025, 2026, we're there today. And a lot of people are now tasting ordering online. I've actually done skip the dishes for the first time this year. I actually ordered something online. I'm old school. And I did it and it came to my door and it was amazing. So that's going to be a problem going forward. A lot of people were forced to try stuff online. So that's going to be a problem for retail. So I do believe that some of these big box centers are going to have a bit of an issue. They're going to have to convert their space to maybe retail and some office. One store becomes retail and then renting off small offices to people who have created small businesses because they lost their job. And now
Got
they're
it.
small entrepreneurs.
Got it. So interesting. And then you're talking about there are still certain essential businesses that could be tenants in some of these, whether it's strip plazas or malls.
Correct.
I don't even know what they are now. I mean, I know certain regulated professionals like massage therapists are still allowed to operate. Acupuncture allowed to operate. Physio, I would imagine. So I guess anything healthcare based that would
Yeah. So alarm systems.
dentists, I don't know, are dentists allowed to operate right now in Ontario? I think so. I hope.
I'm not sure if they are now, but ultimately they will get back to operating.
For sure.
That's a service that health in the body deteriorates rapidly if you don't have good dental care.
Maintenance.
But
Yeah,
it's a main service for people to stay healthy.
got it. So, Matthew, maybe we can pivot a little bit. So, where do you see, first of all, you've told me a little bit about what you've seen. So, in other words, where are you seeing, the commercial space in Ontario? And you work in a few different markets. Do you want to tell us which markets in particular I don't know if I hope it's not a secret.
Okay, yeah. So as a mentor, I do mentor students, and they're all over. So they're in St. Catharines, they're in London, they're in Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo, Barrie is still hot, Whitby, Oshawa, Peterborough, Hamilton is still good.
Okay.
Uh, I tend to stay away from the larger downtown core. It's out of the price range for a lot of my students, and also Mississauga and Brampton, maybe a bit out of the price range for a lot of folks. But last year, multifamily buildings from 6 to to 12-unit buildings, they were, popping off the shelf. People were buying them because a lot of people with 3 houses say, I want to go to the next level up. And
Yeah.
sometimes the next level up is probably a 6-unit property. Now,
Okay.
it's not truly the next level up because a 6-unit, you're still managing.
Yeah.
True next level up is a 10 or 12 unit where you get to experience, you can afford a property manager, you can afford a site superintendent. That's the real experience.
Yeah.
And sometimes you may have to put 2 people together because in real estate, depending on what city you're in, there's always a sweet spot. See, a lot of folks can buy a building for $1 million, and maybe a few can buy for 2, and then maybe even a fewer can buy for 3 million. But when it comes to 4 million to 5 million, it's too much for the small guy and too little for the big guy.
Yeah.
So that's the hot spot where people are having a hard time selling. So that's where you pull together 3 doctors who are trying to get more work-life balance, and they bring the money together, and you're the one who finds that building, and you get a percentage of that. So it might be 25, 25, 25. They bring the money, and you're a 25% owner. I've done it where 20, 20, 20, and I'm 40% owner. And when I say owner, there's a whole conversation behind that.
I
I don't have
understand.
time for that.
You're the active partner. You're the one that found the deal. And the interesting thing is, these people would not, on their own, they would have not done this with their money, realistically, because there's a knowledge curve involved in selecting a property, analyzing the numbers, doing all the due diligence, even finding the properties, because as we already mentioned, if you're trying to find these properties on MLS, good luck to you. That you're going to be in a price war. That's not how you want to find these properties. So,
and also, it's hard to talk to a doctor and convince them to actually invest. But I'll show you an example of the conversation you would have with a doctor. Because if you say to a doctor, "I'm going to make you rich," well, they're already rich, and they take offense to that. And they hear you saying, "Oh, so I made a mistake in my life." So therefore, you have to approach it in a special way. So here's how I approach it. I'll go through this with you really quickly.
sure.
I tell them, you know what? For you to be a doctor, it took you 6,400 hours to get your degree. Then it took you 15,000 hours in medical school. And then it took you 20,000 hours in residency. So it's 41,760 hours to be a doctor. It's a decision you made at 19 and you got there at 29. You did 10 years of living to become a doctor, but you lived 20 years because that's not an easy life being a doctor. Like learning to be a doctor is a hard life. Therefore, you lived 20 years in your 10. Now, and the average work week for some doctors is 59.6 hours a week, which is 1.5 times more than most people. This is what I tell them. And I say to them, there are 3 numbers you should know as a doctor: 29, 38, and 67. 29 is when you became a doctor, 10 years after you started. 38 years of work you will put in. You'll retire at 67. Here's the problem. Conclusion: 38 years of work times 1.5 times the regular, you're doing 57 hours of work, plus your 10 years extra to become a doctor, 67 hours worth of work in 38 years. That's why most doctors, when they're 65, do not look healthy at all. Top of it all, here's your solution. You need work-life balance, I tell them. What you need to do is work 1 less day. I'm not going to help you be wealthy. I'm just going to help you work 1 less day. I'll tell you how in a second. I tell them, but here is what 1 day will do for you. 1 day means 1 day a week times 4 times 12. It's 48 days a year. You're working less. 1,824 days or 5 years less. But you're irreplaceable. I can't replace you. But we can create some mini yous. Over the next 6 years, if every 2 years you buy a building, every 2 years, either you or 2 of your other doctor friends, and I'm the one who takes care of these every 2 years, we buy them and I take care of them for the entire time, you will get cash flow and appreciation. Now, you won't be able to take a day off work for 5 years at least, but at least we buy 2 this year, 2 years from now, 2 years from then, and within 5 years, you begin to see the benefit of the appreciation and the cash flow to begin to say, I'll take the 1 day off work. Because when I tell a doctor who would benefit from 1 day a week, first of all, they will. And secondly, work-life balance, their spouse, their kids. And I sell them work-life balance. I don't sell them investments, is what I'm saying.
Interesting.
And I make them realize I just help them reproduce themselves with these mini doctors.
That's
To real estate.
a
And,
really cool concept, Matthew.
and obviously, I didn't invent all these numbers. Obviously, it's real, but this is the approach that I use to have the conversation with them, and they say, you know what? Yeah, you're right. Let's talk a bit more about this, because that's what they need. One day off work. That's it.
Then Matthew, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but I think the question will come up, why commercial real estate? Why not some other type of investment? Like we already compared commercial real estate to residential real estate and how, okay, if you're going to buy a bunch of houses, you're going to need to buy a lot of them to be able to add that additional sort of monthly income to your lifestyle. Commercial allows you to achieve that a lot faster and more efficiently.
So that's a great question. Why really?
Well, and in particular, yeah, as opposed to, I mean, I've had people on my show talk about other types of investments. I think, can you tell us a little bit of the ROIs? I mean, I hope it's not too much, or I don't know if you can even comment on that, but.
Well, basically, I'll answer it this way. People think there's an either or concept. I always believe you should have some silver. I believe you should have some gold. I believe you should invest in the stock market. I believe you should also have some real estate. I don't believe you can only do one thing. I think you should have a bit of everything. And to me, that's more safety. You cannot be a master of everything, but you can be a master of one and have access to others. And that's where you get the expert who's a stock market genius that you're going to hire to do that part for you. Okay, so you should have them all, but you shouldn't just have one. Number one, the ROIs depend on the risk that you take, and at the same time, the ability to negotiate a good deal. So if I were to negotiate a sweet deal off market because there was no competition, and the person was not thinking of selling, and therefore, I helped them to move to the next level in life because I bought much lower, then my ROIs are going to be a lot better. But that's the same thing in everything: stocks, gold, and silver. So I think the ROIs are subject to how great you are at doing the craft that you're doing, and how can you manage it better, skip the mistakes because you have somebody guiding you.
Yeah.
And then your ROIs become really good, because I've seen guys who put together nice ROI sheets, but they have no experience. And the moment the first bullet is fired over their heads, all of a sudden something bad happens. Great ROI on paper becomes horrible ROI. But the reason why I do like the real estate is because I'm a simple man traveling through the universe. And ultimately, I like to be able to wake up in the middle of the night and go and touch the building. Oh yeah, you're still here. I don't need a report to touch the building. And I could take a look at the active building itself. Is there people coming in and going out? Is it empty? Is it vacant? I don't need a report for that. At the same time, I could see if there's money coming in every month. Whereas on the stock market, I have to depend on a report. And I just hope the guys who are preparing the report are preparing the report correctly. So it's a bit less transparent for me. That's why. But the stock market is great. And Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff, that's phenomenal. So I believe you should be aware of all those things, but get experts to help you. But for me, simple man, I like to touch and feel my investment also. So you can have more than one.
Got it. So Matthew, one of the final questions, where do you see opportunities right now? I mean, especially in light of what's been happening in the marketplace with COVID and how that affected both office space and retail space. Where are you seeing most opportunities right now? Where do you think is a safe place to be for people in the commercial space?
Well, in commercial, self-storage is always a great place to be, because with self-storage, it's not pretty, but there's a whole less effort to bring in good income. I think multifamily between probably 10 and 18 units are good. There's enough people in there to make sure that if somebody leaves, you're still making money. I believe the Strip Plaza is good, but I prefer it now to have retail apartments above it. So if you have 8 units, I want you to have 8 apartments above it. That way, people always need a spot to live up top. And then if a store goes empty, and then you have to avoid the restaurants because they always have the toughest time to finance. And at the same time, they don't stay in business in some of these tough times, right? Although we need restaurants. So by the way, opening a restaurant next year will be great. I've had 8 restaurants because ultimately everything is cheap now. They're empty restaurants with hood systems already in.
Right.
If you're a great cook and you want to open a restaurant, next year would be a great time to do so. I just
Mm.
found somebody who was 25 years old. I created a fog company with them where we go in and we fog a place and clean for COVID, which means it's not a business that I'm spending my time on. We're 50-50. Next year, he'll be 60, I'll be 40, then he'll be 70, I'll be 30. But he's going to do all the work. He's going to build the empire. But I'm just saying we have to adapt to whatever happens with us. Just in closing, people worry about, okay, COVID, what's
Did
happening
you
with
say it's
COVID?
like a sanitation company, Matthew?
Yeah, so we actually go in with a fogging system and we clean every
Fogging?
virus. Fog, yeah. It's a machine
Okay.
that produces a fog, F-O-G, like
Okay,
mist.
yeah. It's just not
a mist.
familiar with the term, yeah.
Yeah, and that mist permeates everywhere, so it kills viruses below and above surfaces
Okay,
on walls. Because if I wipe it down with a cloth, only where the dirty cloth goes, I get. But if you would have mist, like steam, if you steam the whole room with a friendly agent that's, natural agent that technically can kill the virus, then that's a service that we've just gotten into. It's not something I plan to get into, but
sure.
hey, all I'm saying is I can't worry about COVID itself. I just do what I have to do. Can't
Course.
worry about where it came from and why it is what it is. All I can do is worry about how can I make money in the time of COVID? Because the making the money is what takes care of my family, right?
Sure, yeah.
So I have to adapt to that. And that's important.
So again, in terms of opportunities moving forward, this was a side business that came to you, but in terms of commercial real estate, so you mentioned as opposed to a pure strip plaza, you would do what we would call mixed
Yeah,
use building.
I would do a mixed use. So
Yeah,
floors with apartments above, or if I'm going to do multifamily, probably 10 units to about 12 to 18 units.
yeah,
If I'm going to do retail only, I'm going to make sure it's smaller spaces, 1,000 square feet only. Make sure
Mm.
there's not more than one restaurant, if there is a restaurant, and make sure there are things in that retail that actually people need in a recession, in a pandemic, and the internet cannot just take that job away.
Got
And
it.
if you respect those things, I think you'll do good in the commercial world. And it's a great time because a lot of people who own commercial buildings, they're older, like 65 years old, 66 years old.
You don't
They're
want the
ready to
headaches.
retire.
Yeah,
Therefore, it's a great time to buy multifamily right now. And
awesome.
again, just getting the right people on your team to do so. I also have an offer that I have for your people.
Yeah. So yeah, tell us,
Your
Matthew.
group.
You, I know you also obviously mentor. Yeah,
So,
exactly. Okay.
yeah, so for anybody who sees this presentation, whether they see it today, a year from now, as a consultant, I generally would charge a certain amount of money per hour, and it's a sizable amount. But I will do a free 30-minute session. If anybody says, here's where I am, I want to talk to somebody who's been around. Now, I don't come from perfection. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I've lost a lot of money in real estate. I've also made some money too. So therefore, I'm not, let's say, perfect and far from it. But that's the kind of person you want to talk to see what can go right, what can go wrong, and what can I do to move to the next level. So if you want to do that 30-minute phone call, you can reach me at my email or below, and make sure you mention how you found me, so I can appreciate, Letitia. Thank you for the connection.
My
And at the
pleasure.
same
My
time,
pleasure,
too, with
Matthew.
Letitia, obviously you have a team, I have a team, and our teams can work together, which is important.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Matthew. So we'll also put your contact info below the video in case anybody wants to reach out for some support. Maybe they have questions. Maybe they're wondering, hey, you know what? I've done some residential investing. I'm ready to move to the next level, but I may need some hand holding. Whatever questions, it's an open session. You're giving them 30 minutes of your time, free consultation. That's very generous of you, Matthew. Thank you for that. So yeah, with that, I think it's a wrap. I'm gonna see if I can, you may need to stop sharing the screen, Matthew, for a second.
Okay.
And pass the control back to me. If you know how to do that, you'll have to go under participants and make me host again. I'm going to go on Facebook and see if there are any questions from our viewers.
Okay, so multiple participants. Okay, I think you should have it back again.
Yeah, thank you. I don't see any questions, Matthew, but if people do ask any questions after the fact, I will let you know, okay?
Yes.
So yeah, thank you again so much for your time, Matthew, and for sharing some of your insights with us. I know it was just a very entry-level conversation because this is a very broad topic, and I'd like to have you back in the future to give us an update. Maybe tell us again what you're up to, how you're helping people. We didn't even get much into that this time, but I know you've told me you've helped like 16 mentees last year buy properties. Which is incredible. You know, in the middle of a recession, in the middle of COVID, people are buying commercial real estate.
Yeah, the market's hot. It's very hot.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, wonderful. Thanks again, Matthew. Have a great rest of the week, and have a great rest of the week, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Bye, everyone. See you next time. Cheers.